Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good day, whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers out there, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and whatever it is that they might want to talk about. So the title of tonight's show is Oregon Cultural Trust, Oregon Cultural Trust. And my guest tonight will be talking about Oregon Cultural Trust and whatever else. And his name is Kirk Mauser. Kirk Mauser. And we've talked on the phone. I'm called him from Beaverton, Portland area. And he is down in Salem, and we chatted about what the Cultural Trust is about, and I only had a few words because it's long distance and I can't afford, no. And I figured we'd save that sort of passing time for when he's here in the studio with us tonight, and he came all the way up to talk to you or my viewers about the Oregon Cultural Trust and whatever. And in the few minutes before we got before the cameras, we're passing time, and then I learned there's so much about your background, Kirk, that's going to be hugely interesting. And again, it's going to take more than an hour to cover what you're about, in addition to your activities with Oregon Cultural Trust. And as I indicated, the show goes typically in 2 segments, sometimes 3. The first segment is what I call a bio segment. We talk about who you are and where you came from and your personal interests, whatever, but I won't do any psychoanalysis.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'm a retired psychologist, as my viewers out there know. And then we'll go in to talk about the trust, Oregon Cultural Trust. And it isn't rigidly divided that way. What happens, happens as we go along. And you contribute. If I ask you a question you don't care to answer, you can tell me. I doubt that'll happen. I also discovered in a brief conversation before the camera started rolling that you're an artist and an actor and a theater person and a creative individual, and it's going to be fun.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I appreciate being here.
I'm a little bit nervous because I always am, depending on my guest and what I think they're going to be like. And I find as we talk now, I'm more relaxed hanging out with you because I think I'll be switching over from time to time and pretending that you're my director or my leader and I'm on stage again like I used to be a long time ago. You're hugely interesting, I'm sure it's going to be. So shall we talk about some personal stuff?
Well, fire away.
Kirk Mauser. Is there a middle name?
There is a middle name. It's Eric, Kirk Eric Mauser. I was born and raised here, right here in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1967. It was a very good year.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Went to school out in Gresham, Centennial High School. So I was a proud Eagle. Graduated there in '85, moved to Southern California where I did my studies at Cal State Fullerton. Found myself on the road with Broadway production of Les Miserables and then 20 years in New York. But I'm back. I'm back here in Portland.
20 years in New York, and you're back here in Portland.
That's correct.
And I'm sure that's a story.
Oh, there's a story there. Yeah.
What'd you do in Les Miserables?
You know, I played Marius. So I was the young, dashing, handsome, lot of hair ingenue.
Most of that is still true.
That's right. This was 20 years ago.
20 years ago. So you're back here in Oregon, and why did you come back to Oregon?
Well, there are a number of reasons. My parents are still both here in Oregon, retired. My mother was a drama school teacher at Centennial High School for 30 years, and my father as well, a high school soccer coach. And so I wanted to have some time closer to family. Reconnected with a high school sweetheart of mine, and there was enough attraction there to pull me all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. So
it sounds like that's enough.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, anything significant about your cultural heritage?
Well, my cultural heritage actually, I grew up in what you would call a cultural family, if you will. My parents certainly far removed from their ancestry in Germany.
That's right. That's why I asked the question.
That's right. But we do have a very rich family history that settled the Horn, settled in Astoria, A lot of our family divided, lived in Bend and Sisters, Pendleton, all over the state. We've got a lot of Mausers down in California, but I think the best Mausers live right here in Portland.
Okay.
That was for my dad, so yeah.
A religious preference?
You know,
Or are you a-religious?
Oh, sure. No, I grew up as an Episcopalian, so would occasionally frequent the church there when I was living in New York. I admit that I'm not there every Sunday, but I certainly have enjoyed my time in the Episcopal Church.
Uh-huh.
And I've sung for the Pope, so, you know, for those Catholics out there.
You
I've
did.
actually had an audience with the Pope, yeah.
How'd that happen? Tell us about that.
Well, I was part of Leonard Bernstein's Mass, and if you're familiar with his musical piece, it was developed and created for the opening of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. They revived it back in New York a few years back, and I was part of the revival, but that production went to play at the Vatican, and it was the first time that the Vatican actually allowed Leonard Bernstein's Mass to have a performance, you know, obviously there, not only on where the Pope gives Mass, but there within the city limits of the Vatican City. Very controversial because we've got an American Jewish composer writing about a piece that questions faith. Although wonderfully written, certainly not without its challenges in the eyes of the Catholic Church. But they granted permission, were very supportive. The project was well received. We were told as performers, there were 8 of us that came from the States that made up the principal ensemble, if you will. And then the rest of the ensembles were the choirs and the rock band and the orchestra that were made up of various groups. Groups there in Italy, outside of Rome and within the city limits. And we were told, if Cardinal De Palma shows up at our rehearsal, stop everything, give him a hand of applause and say thank you for allowing us to have this piece here at the Vatican and in audience of the Pope. And so in walks this gentleman in a t-shirt, jeans, had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. It's Italy. They can get away with things like that. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, Cardinal De Palma, at least that's what we heard. And so we all stopped the rehearsal. We gave him just a wonderful hand and said, thank you very much. And he walked away. The producer walked up to us and said, hey guys, what was that about? And we were like, well, it was Cardinal De Palma, the man that made this possible. And no, that's Carlos De Palma,
You're
the
kidding.
lighting designer. So we promoted our lighting designer from lighting designer to Cardinal overnight. So then the next day I saw him in the bar drink. I'm not sure what he was drinking, but he obviously found out that he wasn't quite as important as he might have thought he was. But well, it was an honest mistake. So.
We have some stories of it.
Oh boy, that was a fun one.
So overall, your feeling, your impression, and being there in the Vatican and performing that.
Oh, it was an amazing experience. No question about it. The level of talent that exists within the city there of Rome, the singers, the vocalists, the artists, the respect for the work, the respect for the artists themselves. I mean, we felt like royalty. It was really quite nice performing there. And then being in the presence of the Pope, of course, and the cardinals. I mean, there's this otherworldly experience that you have, and it's unlike any other experience that I've certainly had in my past, whether it's performing on the Broadway stage or in front of a TV camera, singing there in front of the Pope. You just feel like, wow, this is really unique and very special.
And you're not a Roman Catholic.
And I'm not Roman Catholic.
Probably
so.
you are, and you don't know it.
yeah, you never know. You never
But
know.
I remember a couple of years ago we were in Rome and went to the Vatican. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. How was the weather when you were there?
Oh, it's stunning.
Gorgeous. And I'm a recovering Roman Catholic. I was a priest for many years. I mean, pardon me, an altar boy for many years. I was thinking about becoming a priest. And I got away from the church many, many years ago. Never mind the reasons for it. And I'm now an atheist, agnostic, or something like that. But when I was there, and we just missed the Mass, but I was in that space, and there was a funny feeling, a strange feeling. And I thought, no, I'm not going to go back and pound my breast again. But anyhow,
Oh, sure, yeah.
there's something very special about it, huh?
There is, I mean, certainly a rich history, and so when you're walking, you know, our country is so young, and
Yes.
when you're in Europe and you're walking the streets of Rome and you're there at the Vatican, you recognize how young we actually are, and from our history and our artifacts and things like that, in comparison to this rich, vast history that they have there, the history with the church, obviously, and really the intellectual capital of the world at one time, and still quite a romantic, interesting place. I tell you, I've never seen so many young men and women dressed to the nines. Every time I went out to eat, it was just fantastic. They just kept throwing food at the table. They say, hey, you know, you have to eat more, eat more, eat more. And you know, I didn't want to leave, to be honest with you. I just had a great time.
You probably have a great time no matter where you are.
Oh, yeah, well, I try.
And let's move along here. Your work, you've done theater kinds of stuff and art kinds of stuff. Will you do a run through for me a bit about what you've done since you started working?
Sure. Well, I
Or
started.
having fun is the same for you as
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's key to whatever you do as far as a job. But I started as a professional actor, and so went to school to train as an actor, and then got into directing and producing later in my life. And so, and it was very, very, I had a very successful, a wonderful time doing it. So I've been very fortunate. Produced in New York at a theater company just outside of New York called Luna Stage, and was there for 5 years. Garnered a lot of skills in management and learning how to operate and facilitate a not-for-profit organization. The company itself had 3 theaters, and so we produced not only live theater, but we also curated art. We had a live music show, poetry slam, you name it. And so it was just a wonderful organization. It's still in existence, so if you ever find yourself out on the East Coast, go to Luna Stage. They've got some wonderful artists there. And after doing that, and then freelancing around the country as an artist and director, I decided to come home. And in coming home, I opened up the theater company here in Portland called Stumptown Stages.
Familiar with it, yeah?
And we're in our 4th season, getting ready to mount The Wiz with a collaborative partnership at Jefferson High School, their old auditorium there, really hoping to invigorate that facility and the student body there, and bring the professionals that work with us at Stumptown to work with the kids there. And through my work with Stumptown, I started working with Center for the Arts Foundation out in Gresham on developing an arts facility. And this is something that's been in the works for literally 20 years. Ideas that have been tossed around about creating an arts center in Gresham. This past summer, we broke ground on phase 1, which is the Arts Plaza, and so we were all very, very excited about the leadership there in that community taking that leap of faith and saying, this is good for Gresham. This is a need and an amenity that the community of Gresham sorely needs. And so I was happy to see that come to fruition. And then my work from there led me to Salem and the wonderful people down in Salem at the Oregon Cultural Trust. And not only working with art organizations, but heritage and humanity organizations as well, 1,200 nonprofit organizations statewide. And so it's just a fantastic organization. It's a great organization that really is there to help all these 1,200 nonprofit organizations across our state sustain. And the idea of the trust was to create an endowment over time. 6 years ago they created it, and this endowment would then indeed keep these organizations afloat.
So let's put a hold on that part
bet.
here, and you keep going with the personal stuff, because I found I was shifting gears in how I was looking at you as you were talking about your experience in directing and producing through the years. I found myself looking at you again as giving me a job, because
Sure.
well, that was years ago.
That's right. Do you sing?
No, in the bar or something.
Right.
But I was with the Tiger's Heart for a while. Did 3 things with them, small parts, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I did on stage was at Heart, was I did Hook and Driving Miss Daisy. and that was fun, and I gave it all up. But I find a person like you in that theater community, I always looked up to and be careful, didn't suck up too hard to get the part, you know.
That's right. That's right.
But we mentioned Jim Cox. I mentioned Jim Cox here. I'm going to have Jim on some other time because I've met him before. It's some other situation. But he directed me once for Tiger's Heart, and a fine human being. Hi, Jim. Be in touch with you. Thanks a lot. And that's how I met you, because I was calling for Jim, and I got you instead. But I think you're going to be better than Jim. No.
He's joking, Jim.
No, of course, of course. But God, that's just a whole life. That's just intriguing. And through my life, I've gone through a lot of things, from bucking rivets in aircraft production many moons ago, and engineering and technical writing, and then psychology and a bunch of other stuff. And here I am now, retired after 80 years, and enjoying most of my life now hosting and producing this show and doing some humanist minister stuff. I marry and do a memorial service from time to time, and a couple of other fun things, but that's what my life is about. But we're talking about you, not me right now. You have a partner.
You know, I do, and she is a lawyer, although has a real passion for the arts, has been known to actually do some community theater work, and is a lovely singer, takes classes at local dance studio at PCC, but so she's a lawyer by day and an artist, you know, secretly by night.
So before I forget, anywhere along the way, and from now on into the future, where my show or I can be of any support with what you're about and what the organization is about, just say the word and you're down here, and we'll do what's required, because I love the arts, as you know.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Children?
No children.
Okay.
No children.
Pets?
Oh, I've had numerous cats. Picked up three cats. Oh, yeah, I love cats. Picked up 3 cats in Los Angeles when I was there touring, and they were strays. And I made the mistake, all the mothers out there, tell your sons not to feed the stray cats. I fed the stray cat, and little did I know that the mother cat was with child, if you will. And so I immediately inherited her litter and tried desperately to find homes for these little kittens while I was living in Los Angeles.
Did you really?
Well, yeah, I took them to a couple shelters that said, well, we will place them in homes, but they were very protective of the cats, and if no one wanted them, then you've got to come back and retrieve them. And after 2 days of that, it was called Actors and Others for Animals, and 2 days of that, and they were mutts. They just were hideous looking, bless their hearts, but they developed into quite lovely looking mutts, and I traveled with them from Los Angeles to New York and then back to Portland again. So
wonderful.
They're road kitties. They
still got them?
Life. Oh yeah.
What are their names?
I have Liat, Tup-Tim, and Tiger Lily. And there's a story behind all 3 names.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
To be in the know. Maybe if you see me in a bar one night, I'll tell you.
I look forward to that.
That's right.
Comes to mind, I had 2 cats, and Phaedra and Kathmandu, and there's some stories. You people who don't love cats have no idea what we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
So let's move along here. Political persuasion, that might cause you some difficulty. I won't ask you that one. And do you view or listen to or read alternative media?
I have been known to I love talk radio, and I'll just whatever's on, I'll listen to it, just for fun. It's a great way to pass the time when I'm traveling between Salem and Portland and Gresham. But I've got really an ear for just about anything. If I turn, likewise with music, I have to say, because my significant other has a 12-year-old son, and his musical choice is not necessarily mine. But you know what? I'll sit there and listen to it and let him explain why he likes it, and try to understand and just be appreciative of that. And as soon as he's out of the car, then I'll look for that classical music station or jazz station and change the channel. I enjoy talk radio.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations.
Well,
that would be of interest to my viewers.
Oh, sure. Well, let's see. Memberships. I'd have to say membership to every art and cultural organization in Oregon, viewers. If you don't
I knew
have
that was
one,
coming.
get one. It's well worth it. If you haven't been down to the Portland Art Museum and seen Wild Beauty, for instance, I mean, what a great exhibit. The kids love OMSI. I mean, we take the 12-year-old and he just will spend hours in there discovering the wonders of science, and I forget what exhibit was there most recently. I think it was the human body exhibit.
Oh yes, it was incredible.
Oh,
yeah.
he loved it. Was in Bend just yesterday at the High Desert Museum, and if you've not been to the High Desert Museum, fantastic. Get your membership there. They've got a living history exhibit right now that is fantastic. The kids can walk up, and it's as if you're back in the pioneer days, the Oregon Trail days, and what the pioneers had to do to survive. And they have a nurse there taking care of Mortimer, who has taken ill. He's got a little buckshot, and so the kids get to with this particular nurse operate on Mortimer. Bless his heart. He survives numerous operations throughout the day by the hands of young kids. But no, so I mean I'm very much an advocate of memberships to museums and galleries and you name it.
Mm-hmm. You think about any people from the past alive today who are significant enough that they're memorable, or you look up to them or admire them particularly? Anybody?
You know, I do. I have. There's been a number of people from relatives, both my aunt and uncle,
Mm-hmm.
who are no longer with us, but both were producers at Como TV station and produced the children's show Boomerang, and just really loved their energy and their creative vitality. Wish they were here today, especially with the pursuits in my adulthood. I would have liked to have had some conversations that I didn't get to have with them, but certainly my aunt and uncle, my parents, a huge influence in my life. I had my best friend, who was a Broadway performer, passed at a very young age. It was back in the 80s, and he didn't survive the AIDS epidemic, unfortunately, and we lost him, and he was just a fantastic performer and a delight to know, and so it was very sad to see him leave this world, but certainly those kind of people that touch your life, even just so briefly on this earth, that make you who you are and kind of give you that extra strength to carry the torch, if you will. So, you know, if I could live part of my life to say, hey, I'm carrying the torch for my good friend who passed at much too young of age, and my aunt and uncle who I wish were here today, then hopefully they're looking down from somewhere, wherever that might be, or looking up, you never know. But I hope that they're appreciative of that torch that I'm trying to carry for them. So,
Do you think of a particular thing that your friend who passed at an early age gave you, or you got from him, that makes him so memorable for you? Some quality that he had?
I'd have to say his music. He was an incredibly gifted singer, and his passion for song inspired me at a very young age. When he passed on, when he had all his friends together, and it was in New York, and he knew he was sick, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to fight this disease for long. His health was failing rapidly, and it was before we had alternative medicine.
Yes.
He'd be here today, I'm sure, if it had been a year later, but that was the situation at the time. But he left with me not only the memories of his voice, but all of his sheet music and his notes and his CDs and all of that beauty that was so much a part of his life and his world. And so, and music today continues to be a very influential aspect of my life. And I think one of the motivating factors of me going into Broadway musicals, of helping create a nonprofit music theater company in Portland, I just wanted that for this community as well. I want the music to stay alive and keep reverberating throughout the community here.
Reluctantly, we're going to have to pause for a minute to take a break, because Dennis is going to yell at me if we don't. But I've got one more question for you before we take a break. what words would you have written on your tombstone when it's all over? If you have a tombstone.
My goodness, yeah.
I've always got a trick question for you.
You sure do, you sure do. And I'd have to say that would be one that I'd have to deflect to my significant other, because she's always planning ahead, and so she'd say, oh, of course you're going to have this written on it. But, you know, good question. I just want, whatever it says, I want to say that I lived my life in its fullest, and that it was full of life and energy and merriment, and hopefully there were people that I was able to touch and give an experience to, that they can then live a better life.
Okay. All right.
But I don't think it'll all fit on a tombstone. I'll have to do the abbreviated version.
We'll put, never mind. So it's time for a break now for about 3 minutes. In a moment, we're going to put up on the screen a few panels that show information that you may want to make note of during the break. You may want to get pencil and paper, just in case. I'm going to tell you about the broadcast schedule for you viewers who live in the Washington County part of the Portland, Oregon metro area. Conversations with Dr. Don shows a broadcast 5 times each week. Typically, a new show is first aired on a Tuesday and is rebroadcast on the following Friday through Monday. You can get my shows on the internet. You can tell your friends to watch Dr. Don shows anytime by going to video.google.com and entering Conversations with Dr. Don. And people in Washington, D.C., our representatives, need to hear from us if we think something is important and we want them to know our views. If the thought crosses your mind, you can contact those people. They supposedly work for us, the citizens. You can take down those phone numbers when they're up on the screen when the panel is up. Call Washington and tell them what you want and don't want them to do. Most of them really do want to hear from you, I promise. So now we're going to put up on the screen the appropriate panels, and we'll take a few minutes break. Here we go. We are back, and I am so glad that you decided to hang with us, because the second half of the show is going to be even better than the first half. Because Kirk is going to talk about Oregon Cultural Trust. And in anticipation of what he was going to say about it, I jotted down a few questions on my cheat sheet that are so elemental and simple, but I think I'll ask them anyhow, to be sure that my whole range of my millions who watch can appreciate what we're talking about when we say Oregon Cultural Trust. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. What is culture?
Well, what is culture? That's a good question. A lot of people, when you say culture, they immediately think of kind of the higher arts, if you will.
Yes.
They think of the museum and the opera and the symphony and the ballet but really culture is what identifies us as a civilization. It's what identifies us as Oregonians or Portlanders or whoever we happen to be. We create our own culture through words, through paintings, through music, through you name it. But so culture, we can identify with something culturally almost every day, and it's not necessarily just the higher arts, but it's the pop culture, for instance, with our youth.
What we do, what we are, on an ongoing basis, among ourselves, with each other, to each other.
You bet. I mean, it's one of our greatest exports in our country is culture. So many countries around the world look to the quote-unquote American culture for their entertainment value, whether it's the Hollywood pictures or movie, music. But that's one of our strengths, if you will, as an American culture. I think it's the melting pot of what makes us so unique and wonderful is that who are we as a culture? Well, we're everything as a culture,
including the over-acquisition and the need to have more stuff that we can store.
That's right.
But that's a small part.
Yeah,
this is a love fest. I had to throw that in there.
That's a sick part of our culture, isn't it? Yeah.
But I hear you. So that's culture, and the point that other nations and other cultures like what we do here and how we are as Americans in the American culture and the Oregon culture. I think in terms of the U.S. and the different states, the Oregon culture is such that people want to move here because of how we are and how laid back and not just how green and wet Oregon is. Am I talking about culture or just romanticizing?
No, you are. You're talking about culture. Absolutely.
Trust. Culture, cultural. We talked about that. A cultural trust. What is a trust in terms of culture?
Well, it's interesting. When the cultural trust was named, the idea was, again, to create an endowment, a public endowment for nonprofit cultural organizations.
Say what an endowment is.
Endowment is where you will take some of donated dollars and place it aside so that it can collect interest over time. As those dollars are receiving interest, of course, then they're being allocated to the various cultural organizations. And so really, the goal is, this is long term, and we won't see it in our lifetime, but for the Oregon Cultural Trust to have a $200 million endowment that it will then cycle.
How much?
200 million.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. We're at about 10 million right now. So we got a long way to go.
A long ways to go.
We're a long ways to go. But that's the goal, and that was the purpose of the Oregon Cultural Trust. The history of public art funding, not only here in Oregon but across the country, has been certainly challenging. But certainly here in our own state, for years there was a time when we were 51st. Ranked as far as a lack of public funding in the country. And you think, well, 51st, who was in front of Oregon? Guam? Well, yeah, you got it. Now, since that time, there's been some corrective measures and recognition that we certainly can't tax people to death. We just don't have it within us as Oregonians. We're paying a lot on our property taxes. How do we fund nonprofits? And the key is nonprofits. These nonprofit organizations, they're not making money. They're just trying to survive. And yet they are the keepers of what is most sacred about our culture here in Oregon. They're the keeper of the artifacts. They're the keeper of the words. They're the keeper of our fantastic symphonies and ballets and children's groups and museums and galleries and you name it. And without them, the void would be huge. We just picture Ashland without the Shakespeare Festival, the country's largest regional theater company. Picture, the Alberta Street in Portland without the artists and their businesses. You can see how arts and cultural groups, how they really are an economic generator for our culture, if you will. So that's kind of the idea of the trust, is to create something that we can then give back.
I think from history it shows that the arts have always been part of different cultures, always. I don't think of a time in recorded history where there was no arts as such. Do you?
No, I mean, you certainly can. You take a look, and I not that I'm a historian, but
Yeah.
within my studies in the theater, you've got the ancient Greek and the Roman theaters. A lot of our religious beliefs came through very theatrical presentations at the time. A lot of the writings that we are able to examine, even in our own country, from the Native American Indians, that we'll find drafted on the walls of caves, and we learn how these people survived, lived, bred, and so the arts and the way that those those examples were used in various cultures, I think, have been from the very beginning of time.
It's a natural part of the human animals
sure
as
is.
such, and if we suppress it, there's something bad that happens, or good things don't happen for us. Huh?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think there's a need for mankind to be expressive.
Womankind too.
Womankind too, as well. Womankind.
No.
yeah. I don't want to get in trouble here. But to be expressive, and how do we express ourselves? Well, we express ourselves through writing. They talk about, well, what is an artist? What is the creative artist, the creative class? That's a kind of a line that you've probably heard in the past, where you're talking about the advertisers out there. You're talking about novelists. You're talking about what you do. People that work in the television industry. I mean, all are connected to the arts. It's really quite an amazing, very, very booming business, if you will. And again, it goes back to one of the keys of our culture in our country is that it's one of our greatest exports. Why not continue to nurture it? We sometimes take artists for granted because they're resilient, and we think, well, you kick them in the teeth, they're going to get right back up, and they're going to keep singing for their supper. Again, there's a great need there to keep these organizations afloat, and the trust. That's really kind of the creative concept behind the trust. It's been our governor. In fact, when he announced $1.65 million in grants this year, he stated that the Oregon Cultural Trust is the most powerful and important tool that we have supporting cultural organizations, bringing arts and culture to rural communities and building our creative economy and the thousands of sustainable jobs that come with it. And
That's Governor Ted Kulongoski, our Oregon governor, yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. And so I think he really hit it on the head there with what the Cultural Trust provides. It has 5 statewide partners. It has county coalitions in all 36 counties. And these county coalitions will receive X number of dollars annually from the trust, and they will then farm their money out to other organizations. The trust itself only gives to nonprofits. The coalitions can give to individuals, to other groups, and so it's very, very far-reaching in all 36 counties, plus the 9 federally recognized tribes as well. So they're also part of this cultural trust, and so it's vast and far-reaching. And currently, like I said, we've got $10 million in our endowment. people, this is the great thing. This is where you get really excited, especially if you're looking for a tax break out there. But it's the only state in the country that has a tax credit for culture. And what that means is that you have to give first. You have to give to your nonprofit organization, cultural organization, or maybe have a membership to the art museum, or somehow give, and in those dollars, then you can give again in an equal payment, up to $500 as an individual, up to $1,000 if you're filing jointly, or $2,500 if you have a corporation. And you can match the same dollars that you've given to your favorite organization, say like Broadway Rose in Tigard.
Theater company.
A theater company. If you've given $500 to them as an individual, then I can give $500 to the Oregon Cultural Trust, and it's not a tax deduct, it's a tax credit. So that means that 100% of that $500 that I give to the Oregon Cultural Trust, after I've already made my gift to Broadway Rose, is going to come right back to me.
Right.
If I owe Oregon state taxes. And so it's an opportunity for Oregonians to direct their funds. It's like being able to give to cultural organizations not only once but twice, because it keeps giving. And the trust itself will then take its dollars and then give back. So if you are a big supporter of an organization like the Portland Opera, for instance, or if you have a membership of the Art Museum, or you listen to the Symphony in Eugene, I mean, all of these organizations, Livewire, you name it. I mean, just there's 1,200 of them out there, and they're on the website, culturaltrust.org, and you can see all the various nonprofit organizations. And if you give today, take advantage of that tax credit. It's 100% tax credit, and quite an opportunity.
I'm learning so much here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. So, I wonder, can you see the end of a chain where there's a recipient of this funding and track it back to the overall organization? You know what I'm trying to say? I'm not sure I know myself, but
but just being able to kind of define the web of
yes, please.
Of how this works. Well, there's out of the 100% of the dollars that are brought in annually toward the cultural trust, 42% of those dollars are given out to these nonprofit organizations, and it's divided in three ways. We give our 5 statewide partners a third, we give our coalitions a third, and then we give state grants through the trust a third of those dollar amounts. So that's farmed out right there immediately. When we give a third of those dollars to our coalitions, which are the 36 counties in our state, then they have grant programs, that people can then seek additional dollars. Individuals like you or I, if we had a one-man show out there and we wanted to present it in Prineville or somewhere, we could seek those dollars in their county to support that program. Or, the dollars have been allocated to schools that were in need of band equipment and instruments, or to historical societies in small towns to renovate their historical buildings to help preserve their artifacts. And so, it affects every Oregonian in the state some way. The trust does, and the dollars that are allocated. And again, it's 1.65 just this year. But I have some statistics here, if you don't mind me looking. But since it was the inception, there were 14,000 donors during that time. Contributions of 14.1 million that have been received, and we also earn dollars from the license plates as well.
Yes.
And so if you see people driving around with the Cultural Trust license plates, it's
now
another.
I know what that means.
It's another great way. I was just at the DMV the other day, and currently it's about $45 when you register your vehicle for an Oregon Cultural Trust plate. But what it does, it's a unique way again for those dollars to be allocated to the trust, so that the trust can continue operating and helping sustain these nonprofits across our state. So. Very, very unique. It's been compared to, the trust has been compared to the bottle bill, mail-in ballots, as very unique to Oregon and our very progressive state.
An old lumbering fishing state.
That's right. Go figure. We're doing something right. And so.
I can tell by talking to you now as you talk about it, you really don't like what you're doing.
Oh no.
It shows in your
Oh, does it?
eyes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I lack the passion.
Yes. So you're going to stick where you are for a while? You're enjoying it that much in what you're doing now?
Well, I hope to. I started with the trust just recently and celebrated the first annual Day of Culture for the state of Oregon, and the governor proclaimed it Day of Culture. It's October 8th. It will happen every year, and this previous year, this year that we're actually in still, on October 8th, if you happen to be down at town at the Performing Arts Center, there was activities all day long there. There were activities in Eugene and in Bend and in Hood River and in Lincoln City. It was a statewide celebration called the Day of Culture, and it'll happen again on October 8th of next year. But I started with the trust then, helping organizing those particular events across the state, and loved it so much I went to leave my office there in Salem, and the door was locked, and so I couldn't get out. So they kept me there.
Is
So
that what happened?
I think that's a good thing. But yeah, no, I really enjoy my work. So.
How about the people you work with? Pretty enjoyable?
Oh, you bet. Chris Darcy is the executive director of the Oregon Cultural Trust. She wears she does double time in Salem because she's also the executive director of the Oregon Arts Commission, and this woman is quite the advocate for cultural arts organizations and humanity organizations and heritage organizations across the state, and we are very thankful to have her there in Salem. Her staff consists of Cynthia Kirk, who is the marketing director for the Oregon Cultural Trust, and some wonderful other people there in the office. Raisha Fleming, who works as an administrative assistant. There's 3 of us in the trust, and it's a lot of work, but we've got some great support from our county coalitions as well.
And your title?
My title is the interim trust manager. So I am there to manage so the trust. So no, it's really a wonderful position. I'm there to again encourage people to give to the trust by December 31st, to take advantage of the tax credit, to get the word out, to encourage people to give to their favorite nonprofit cultural organization. In today's economy, what the challenges that we face are that we're going to hold so tight to our wallets and our checkbooks that we might be hesitant to write that check to our favorite museum or youth symphony, and more than ever they need it now. And it's one thing for me to go home at night and have some challenges financially, but at least I can turn on the radio, listen to some music, or be enlightened by a book, or see a great play, or listen to a wonderful symphony. I think if I didn't have that opportunity, if our 1,200 nonprofit organizations fail because of the economy, then where would we be? I mean, we would certainly be at a loss, and it's not much. We can't give millions of dollars. Obviously, we're not in that position. But if you can give $20, $30, I tell you, I spend that a week at Starbucks. So make that one sacrifice and stop drinking that latte. Challenge yourself for 2 weeks. Not to drink a latte. No, I'm not. Now I'm going to have Starbucks after me.
And me
say,
too.
Geez, you killed our sales at the end of the year.
So, looking back at your time, pardon me, beyond just being with the Oregon Trust, but your career over the time you've been acting and all you've described and being on the East Coast, think about some particular time or incident or event that gave you a particular sense of accomplishment or enjoyment or exhilaration that comes to mind now that you'll share with us.
Well, I've had a number
A bunch of them, huh?
yeah, a number of wonderful moments. One that I had mentioned there in Rome, but I've been very, very blessed with my career, taking me to cities all over the country. One of my favorite stops happened to be in New Orleans, and this was obviously before the.
That's where I was born.
Oh, wow, lucky man. Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, we had such a fantastic time there. The history and the excitement of the French Quarter, and the coffee, and the people. I just absolutely loved it. And I was there on tour with the show, but it was moments like that, traveling, meeting other people, having an opportunity to meet Sheldon Harnick, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof. And I did a
really?
show with him, and then he wrote me a song to perform for the first time. And
With him? What do you mean with him? What'd you do?
well, I did a production of his in New York called Dragons, and Sheldon had written it, and it was really a lovely piece. And I played Sir Lancelot, but not the Sir Lancelot, the distant cousin of.
Uh-huh.
And so it was tongue in cheek, and it was a political satire.
Of course.
But Sheldon wrote me a song, and so that. First time that the song had been performed live on stage, and it was quite an honor just to be able to sing his lyrics and musical notes and words, and so that was exciting.
I hate you. I hate you. If I were a rich man.
That's right.
I bet you've got a ton of stories.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've had a wonderful life so far, very rich. Yeah. So I've been getting the high sign that it's time for us to start winding down. Keep your pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. Thanks for watching. I invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show, and I mean it. It helps us give you a better show in the future. My email address is friendlydon@aol.com. My guest's email address was up on the screen during the show. I hope you were involved enough to take it down. When you write, let me know if it's okay to read your email on the air. If I find it exciting and intriguing enough, I'll read it and give you credit for it. And a few public service announcements. Before I do that, though, you have a final thought you want to leave with our audience here before I finish my closing comments.
Well, again, I just want to really encourage people to.
Number two.
Really encourage people to give by December 31st to the Oregon Cultural Trust, and take advantage of the tax credit and really help these 1,200 nonprofit organizations survive in these challenging times. And I know it's hard to give, but if you can spare it, now's the time. And if you can't give, then get out there and continue to be a patron of the arts.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, now a few public service announcements that I typically do, and I know if you've seen these before, you may get bored, but I think it's important. The Alliance for Democracy is the first organization I want to tell you about, because I see myself as a grassroots sort of political activist in political and social issues. The Alliance for Democracy is a national organization that works for those kinds of things that have to do with progressive and liberal points of view that are so important to our country nowadays, particularly with our new government coming in January with Barack Obama. And there's the website and phone number for the national organization. And the local chapter of the Alliance for Democracy is in Portland, and there's the website and the phone number. And David Delk is our co-chair. When you call David and tell him you want to be a part of what we're doing at the local chapter, mention you, I turned you on to him. So let's talk about the American Civil Liberties Union. Yay! Without the ACLU, I think our civil liberties would be down the tubes completely. They're partially down there, but with this new administration coming in, I hope they'll be recovered. The ACLU hotline, racial profiling. Sometimes law enforcement becomes overeager and stops somebody because of how they look, rather than being suspected of some criminal activity. Call the ACLU if you think you've been stopped because of that. The American Humanist Association, I'm a humanist minister. The AHL is a group of people that are interested in human beings and their welfare, and we're mostly atheists or agnostics or something of that order. There's a local chapter of the AHA, and here it's in Portland. There's our local chapter. We meet on Sunday mornings at 9:30 at Friendly House on 26th Avenue in Northwest Portland. We have speakers and we presentations and open discussion and all sorts of interesting stuff as an alternative, so to speak, of formal religious Sunday morning activities. So there's a website and a phone number. Come out and see what we do on Sunday mornings. And I got to tell you about Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! That's my favorite TV show. Democracy Now! It's on cable and it's on satellite. Democracy Now! Look it up. Amy Goodman, one of my few heroes. So it's time to say goodnight. Before we say goodnight, I want to thank everybody, the crew members and the teachers at TVCTV for giving me the opportunities to do this show, other parts of the country. Thank you for watching. Again, thanks for coming on the show. And I got to go slow on this because it's important. KFC, you know what KFC is? Not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you, Kirk.
Well, thanks.
And you, Rick, and you, Dennis, and you, Jay, and you, Jim, and you, Don. Thanks again for watching. Good night.